group must have been wonderful. A large portion, someone remembers, a large portion of the fondest memories from 1924 until the 1960s came from activities held at the focal point for entertainment, parties, music, and food. It was a building which was later called the Little House, and then it became known as the House in the Woods. At first, it was a shack located near what is now Langdale Hall. The classes of 1923 and 1924 adopted the shack as their project and changed its appearance into a comfortable and nice hideaway, which was greatly enjoyed. Then in the 1930s, the WPA constructed the picturesque log cabin remembered so well by so many. It housed the yearbook and the student newspaper, served as a clubhouse and a recreation center. It became a campus retreat where magical things happened and where memories linger of the fairies that slipped in from the woods to keep the house clean, and thoughts of dancing to the record player's sounds till Miss Hopper called time. Over the past 8 years, we have had a wonderful time retracing steps and memories associated with the House in the Woods. Today, we have Lee Pulliam, class of 1948, to share some of her thoughts about the house with us.
One day last week, I parked my car on Georgia Avenue, and I took a stroll down the Camellia Trail. Today there's an impressive entrance and a dedication plaque to Mr. and Mrs. Whitehead, but I remembered only stepping off the driveway and into that wonderful Camellia Trail. When I knew them, those beautiful bushes were 2 or 3 feet high. Now I looked up and I saw them overhead, towering almost as tall as trees. Then the path was a thick layer of fragrant pine straw. Now there is a winding paved walkway. Of course, at this time of year, there are no blooms on the trees, so I wonder why I remember them always in bloom. Always those reds, those variegated, those deep pinks, those pale pink perfections, and those glossy white blossoms. Somehow, as I walked down the trail, I dropped 50 years, and I wandered aimlessly along the old footpath among those endlessly blooming camellias. And then, when at last I came to the point where the pathway turned southwest, I closed my eyes, and there before me at the end of the trail was the house in the woods. It was still standing in that pine straw clearing, in that thicket of wonderful, tall, towering pine trees. The sunlight filtered through the pine needles, causing the red-brown logs to gleam in the sun. The white mortar between the logs glistened, and the stone chimneys stood square against the sky. I held that picture for a long time. And then I finally opened my eyes and filed the picture away in my memory where it really belonged. But going back more than 50 years, the house in the woods was then a very real structure and an important part of my 4 years at GSWC. Its wide front porch, its cozy fireplace with comfortable sofas, its very forgiving kitchen was a social center for the young ladies of GSWC. How often I escaped the noise and female chatter of the dorm rooms, Converse, Ashley, Senior Hall, and the equally annoying dead quiet of Miss Pittipat's library. Do you remember it? And I would take my book and do my reading and my studying on the steps of the house in the woods. I would sit there and soak up the sun. Of course, that was strictly forbidden on front campus. And all the while I was trying to read and understand some classic tome that Dr. Gulliver had assigned for his very lively discussions. And you remember Dr. Gulliver's discussions were always lively. This was a good place to study, but it was an equally good place for me to get away and rehearse alone or with a fellow actress some scene from theater class that Miss Sawyer had assigned. You remember Miss Sawyer was something of a perfectionist, and you didn't dare go on stage with her unless you were letter perfect. And so we would do scenes from Night Must Fall, The Women, or Our Town. You remember those productions? Of course, if you belong to clubs, and most of us belong to at least a dozen of the clubs at Georgia State Women's College, there were many, many occasions when we went every day of the week to a club meeting at the House in the Woods. And of course, there were endless, maybe thousands of pictures taken for the yearbook on the steps of the little house in the woods or in front of the fireplace. But you know, the best of times at the house in the woods happened when a bunch of girls invited a bunch of guys over for a special house in the woods evening. Now, those are in capital letters. Those are my capitals. These evenings always included a big fire in the fireplace, a tall stack of records to which everybody contributed her favorite records. Somebody's record player was brought down from the dorm room, and there was a supper cooked collectively by everybody present. Now, supper usually meant spaghetti because that was the only thing we knew how to cook. Unless, of course, we got smart and invited some of the home ec majors. Then we had something different. After cleanup in the kitchen, in which everybody participated, there were those long, world-shaking discussions, do you remember those, around the fireplace where we solved all the world's problems. And then there was the roasting of marshmallows in the fireplace. And of course, there was lots and lots of dancing to those records. These were really great evenings. And you know, somehow, I don't remember any chaperones there. I'm sure they were, because chaperones were always present. But maybe I have a selective memory. During my years at GSWC, the world was changing. The war was ending, and the fast-paced, prosperous post-war years were beginning. The dignified, formal, stately Georgia State Women's College, of which we are so proud, became a vigorous, ever-evolving co-ed school. Somehow the house in the woods stood as a symbol of that quieter, more decorous, more innocent time. And we, the graduates of Georgia State Women's College, have come to treasure the memories both of those very innocent years and of the little old log cabin that symbolized those special times for us.
We thought and thought about what we could do this year to celebrate this great occasion. The one thing we had not experienced with